Despite being an eccentric enough person to have a podcast about magic, I find the topic of UFOs and UAPs difficult to talk about. Unlike animism, folk magic, and faeries, the UAP subject is no longer a fringe pursuit. It's making headlines in legacy media outlets and being earnestly discussed by the figureheads at both ends of the U.S. political spectrum. Unlike most of what we cover on this show, UAP phenomena is now a suitable topic of conversation for even the normies in my life. Now, with very few qualifiers, I can dive into a philosophical conversation with almost anyone about the vast spectrum of implications we're facing if we are to finally find ourselves the recipients of some kind of official disclosure. I think my hesitation to bring up these subjects casually has something to do with the ways in which, despite dovetailing with so many of my own spiritual and philosophical interests, the general consensus is that this phenomena can not only be explained within a fundamental materialist worldview, but that it, in some way, supersedes the spiritual, rendering it obsolete. When we look at the mainstream coverage of the UAP topic, what we see is a very materialistic spin on what is otherwise a fairly mysterious and aberrant phenomena. This narrative fetishizes the tech of these so-called crafts and presupposes an advanced alien race, perhaps ready to welcome the humans of the 21st century into their intergalactic federation, now that we have AI deepfakes and self-driving taxis. For someone like me, interested in the esoteric and arcane, this scenario does not feel like progress, nor does it describe what I see when I explore the UAP subject with magician goggles. During my conversation with today's guests, Sinéad Whelehan and Anthony Miller of the Fire and the Cosmos podcast, Sinéad made a fascinating point about how the historically male-dominated field of ufology has skewed the narrative of the subject toward the nuts and bolts paradigm most of us take for granted today. Interestingly, I think you can see echoes of this in a majority of the paranormal fields, where for most of this century, a primacy has been placed on cutting-edge technology being employed to hunt and prove the tangible reality of these subjects and subdue them into the rational materialist paradigm once and for all. It's heartening to see a shift in the conversation around UAP and related fields, and the welcoming of more female voices and perspectives. With this shift, the wider acceptance of the right brain side of the conversation has finally come, and subjects relating to consciousness, myth, and spirituality are being less relegated to the fringes. With this holistic consideration of the UAP topic, suddenly, the knowledge and experience of the occultist or magician feels just as relevant to the task of grokking this mystery as any cutting-edge science. And with this paradigm shift, perhaps our preconceived notions of what science and magic are in the first place can begin to grow and expand. Anthony Miller and Sinéad Whelehan, welcome to Radical L Fam. It is awesome to have you here.
Thank you so much.
Happy to be here.
Yeah, we're really happy here. We've been looking forward to this, and we love you, and we love what you do. So very happy to be here.
I appreciate it. Yeah, I was on your show. We were talking before we hit record about a year ago, and so I'm very stoked to have you on now to chat. I'm a very big fan of what you all are doing over on Fire in the Cosmos. But for folks listening who maybe haven't checked out your show yet and are less familiar with you, if you could just take turns and give a quick little intro about who you are and what you're doing and maybe how you ended up on a podcast about magic.
Sure. Anthony, do you want to go first?
I was going to let you go first, but I'm happy to. So our show, Fire in the Cosmos, I started it formerly as Obliterate the Construct. This was probably around December of 2024. And Sinéad came on board after we met at Contact in the Desert last year. So around June of 2025. And thankfully, it was a pretty easy and quick transition from my previous co-host. And I started off the show back then as a passion of mine to, like, I came into all these topics, all these anomalous and high strangeness and paranormal topics, primarily from the UFO phenomenon. And because of my upbringing, because of the way I've kind of had to move between worlds, from whether it was from a religious standpoint or a sociological standpoint or a political standpoint, I very much had this perspective that kind of like a very syncretic perspective on how ideally we should be and live as a species and where we're falling short. And I saw that all around me. And I saw the UFO topic, especially once I understood the connections with consciousness that permeate the subject matter and experiencers. I saw it as sort of a catalyst for myself to see some of these interconnecting and permeating and weaving threads that connect us all, and how that could open up others to these threads. And I guess I saw a need to communicate better all of these things. That there's a lot of podcasters out there. There's a lot of echo chambers that are stuck in their own kind of subsets of these fields, whether it's the cryptids or the Bigfoot people or the ghost people or the UFO people, or the magic people.
Mm-hmm.
And there's only a few like you who are out there and approaching this from a more like from the John Keel type perspective, and an Affordian perspective. And that's kind of what I wanted to bring to the topic, but also do it as a way to break down the walls and the constructs that have been put up that have prevented people from realizing the similarities across all of these things. And that's really what drove me to start it. And I'll let Sinead continue from there, from when she joined.
Well, I had an experience of doing a podcast about a year or 2 years, I think, before I met Anthony. And I'm actually not really an on-camera person. Like, I'm much more a behind the camera person. That is really my nature. But as many of us know in this field, there's often this interesting experience of feeling like you get pulled towards or guided towards things, right? Or the world around you keeps telling you in some way or another that you need to try or do such and such. And so what kept coming at me was I should be doing a podcast. I should be doing a podcast. Like, people kept telling me that, which was very nice to hear, but I really didn't think I was ever going to do it. Then I was asked by this other person that I used to know, to do a podcast with her. And I thought, oh, maybe this is the universe, giving me an opportunity. So I just decided to say yes. And we tried it out, and I'm definitely really glad I did it. Um, it was a big learning experience. I learned a lot. I developed some skills that I didn't have, like such as managing social media, because at the time that I started doing this with her, I found social media totally abhorrent and I didn't want to have anything to do with it. And she sort of taught me that it has something, it's a skill that you can develop. You can create the algorithms to like come and meet you in the space you want to be in on social media. So things like that were kind of helpful because we do need to interact with the world, right? If we want to get these messages out there. But ultimately that podcast did not work out, and that's okay. It just wasn't gelling. And so I kind of felt like, oh, okay, that's it. Did a podcast, done, finished. And so I didn't have any intention to do another one. Went to Contact in the Desert last year, May 2025. And immediately, like the very first night before the event started, met Anthony because we have a mutual friend, Hakeem Isler, the creator of Psy Games, who's one of my closest friends in the field. And we only really get to see each other when we're at events. So we had arranged to meet up at the front door, and then Anthony wandered up already knowing Hakeem, and Hakeem introduced us, and that turned into a 6.5 hour long conversation that went until like 2 o'clock in the morning. It was one of those, right, where Anthony and I were like, right, I know you. We knew each other. We had this feeling of familiarity immediately and recognition and
Mhm.
right. So it was a really wonderful conversation. And unbeknownst to the both of us, we were both thinking the same thing, which was, wouldn't it be so great to do a podcast with this person? Right. And neither of us were verbalizing that. We were just thinking it. Anthony already had a podcast partner. And so it didn't seem like it was even a possibility. So we just thought, well, this is a great new friend. Next morning, he comes, yeah, he comes up to me. He's like, hey, Sinead, guess what? My podcast co-host resigned, like totally unexpected, you know? And so we were like, well, I guess, that's when we verbalized what we had been thinking the night before. And it was just immediate, it was almost like a telepathic connection. We're going to do this podcast. And it's been very aligned. Like we definitely share, everything Anthony just said, I fully support and agree with. I think it's very important to um, try to offer something different in this field. Try to open new windows of possibility, of conversation, of perspective. And a big reason for that is that we really are living in these kinds of constructed boxes of how we're supposed to quote unquote be living. The right way to live, the wrong way to live, the right way to think and feel, the wrong way to think and feel. And I just don't really believe in that. I never have. I think fundamentally there are rights and wrongs, but a lot of the times those social constructions and that social conditioning keeps us from expanding. It keeps us from really being authentically who we are. So I'm all for authenticity, and I'm all for really thinking our way through this as well as experiencing, right? I am definitely an experiencer. I've had experiences all my life that are unusual. And they're increasing exponentially these days because I'm further and further into my spiritual path, and I'm more and more involved in the community. So I just wanted to be able to have wonderful conversations with people in the field who are forward thinkers, who are innovators, who are spiritual people, who are not just coming at it from an intellectual viewpoint, because that's limiting, right? I mean, so much of the phenomena is an experience. You can't just read books about it. You have to actually engage with it, get to know it, bring it into your body, to really understand, not just in your head. And so I feel like we're bringing a holistic viewpoint. We're interviewing people who are intelligent, thoughtful, warm-hearted, good-hearted people who are trying their best to human, the best that they can, are also approaching it very thoughtfully, this whole field, but also have unusual experiences and are not ashamed or afraid to share them. So I love that we offer this kind of intersection of intellect and spirituality and experiential wisdom as well as intellectual wisdom. Yeah, that's very special.
Yeah.
Oh, that's incredible. Yeah, and what an amazing story. So strange that you both had started podcasts that amicably divorced right around the same period of time so that you would have the perfect opportunity to come together. It's so wild. I love
Yes,
it.
we consciously uncoupled with our previous.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
I also I want to add one thing I forgot to mention is that, like, part of my thinking in doing this the way we do it is that there's a dearth of guys out there doing this with women, and especially in the UFO field, and talking about these topics in that way. I don't know about your field or others, but I thankfully I came to understand how important it was to bring on a woman's voice and perspective through my journey in life, and not just in this field, but in general, and just to be exposed to other perspectives. And there's so much you can learn there. And so often, I know women in the UFO field. There's a lot of amazing women out there, and in the sci field, but they so often get their voices get drowned out. Or there's this fear, and then Sinead can probably speak much better than I can about this. There's this fear of speaking out because of the patriarchal systems in place that would, like, it would treat women differently if they were to say something that came off as taboo or paradigm opposing, compared to when men would do it. So I understood that, and not just that, but even in the guests that we choose to have on the show. I mean, we've had I'm pretty sure we have a majority of women, and then just a bunch of minorities on our show all the time, because there's amazing content, not just content, but wisdom in what they have to say and share with the world. And it's not really being provided for the public to see and hear. And we both, I think, really understand and know how important that is. So we're proud to do that for everyone.
Yeah, this is a global phenomenon, right? I mean, it's not specific to a certain subset of people, but if you were to hop on, if you're somebody new to, let's say, ufology or even the spiritual world, and you hop on YouTube, you start searching, the very first things you're going to find are going to be, podcasts that are from men, like male led podcasts. They're all the most dominant voices in the field. And of course, they have a place, right? There's value in everything that they're offering for sure. But I would just love to see, because ufology and the spiritual world still is very much a boys' club, just because we live in a patriarchal system. It's woven into every aspect of how we operate. And so, taking what Anthony said even a little bit further, because Anthony, you mentioned women being afraid to speak out because of what they say might be so different than the male perspective. I would take it even further and say, if we're even heard, like if what we have to say is even heard, because that's really the point is that those voices are speaking, but they're just kind of going out into the ethers, like people are not really paying proper attention. So hopefully that will change. I think it's important not to have like a chip on your shoulder and be angry about it because that doesn't really achieve anything, but to try to be skillful and straightforward with, what women have to offer. And also men, there's something going on with men in this community too. And also in our society and culture right now, where I think the definitions of masculinity and what is acceptable masculinity has changed and shifted so much. And that as a result of that, I think a lot of men are feeling uncertain about, how to interact with women, how to speak or act in public because of how the spotlight is on men right now, right, in their behavior. um, but I hope that that doesn't prevent men from going deeper into what women can offer, which is really a deeper wisdom of emotion and the language and intelligence of emotion and intuition, right? Like getting out of the intellect, getting into the body and into the more nebulous things that are part of the experience that are also harder to define and harder to prove or document or research. Men, I find, tend to, this is a blanket statement, of course, but tend to really take a lot of pleasure in being able to organize things into boxes, identify them, label them, and then communicate. I know this because, right? Whereas women are coming from more of the place of the unknowable. And there's so much interesting symbology in just women's bodies, right? Like the womb is a hugely potent symbol of the universe and birth and death and everything, right? So I just think there's a lot of possibility for men and women to meet each other in a different space and connect in a deeper way that is richer and more kinder and also more nourishing, intellectually, spiritually, emotionally, in every way for both men and women. So I'm trying to I am envisioning that future. That's part of my manifestation practice is I vision that future where we can come together on this plane and share with each other without so much judgment, I guess, and,
Yeah.
internal criticism, like deciding what's right and wrong and what's the right kind of information, the wrong kind of information, what's real and what isn't. None of us have a clue what's real and what isn't. That is the actual truth. So yeah, if we meet in the space of I don't know, rather than the space of we all know something and we're here to tell each other what we all know, but rather come together as like, let's explore this together. No, none of us have any idea what's going on. Let's just have fun on this journey of exploration, making mistakes, uncovering things that are interesting, inspiring each other, et cetera, and see where that lands. Right. So yeah, that's my hope for the future. One of them anyway.
Yeah, I really identify with what you're just describing there about the increased voice of women just looking at this kind of wider paranormal world, including spirituality, UAP, magic, like the big picture. Because if I look back, I've been interested in this kind of stuff, my whole life since I was a kid. I liked unsolved mysteries and that kind of stuff. And then as I got older, I got more engaged in certain ways. But my interest has only increased as this shift has slowly started to happen, where women, I think, have had a stronger influence and their voices have been more, people have been more open to them. Because what that's done is, I remember the way podcasts were 15 years ago, the ones you could find, and they were more male dominated, and everything was still very much more in that materialist worldview because it was about control and what we can know and, you know, dismissing things that we couldn't know. because that's silly or like that's not real.
Yeah.
And it was never interesting to me. These are a bunch of people talking about strange things from the armchair without actually engaging with it or letting ourselves be open to this mystery. And so I was never that interested in it. I never would have wanted to start my own podcast back then because, yeah, it just didn't seem like a community I really was interested in engaging with. And then as time has gone on, part of what's made me so interested and more active is seeing how much more people are wanting to talk about this mystery, this openness. And yeah, I think you're right that that is a kind of like divine feminine principle that's finally having more of a voice, including an actual just feminine voice of actual women speaking, you know? So it's very cool.
Yeah. And we can talk about this later about like how I had a similar journey, Chad. But for me, I actually came from that world where I was constantly thinking from my head and analytically and logic oriented, professionally and in general. And it took like uh, a self-shattering and a mind-shattering experience to really get me to do this way. So yeah, happy to talk about that later.
Is that relating to your protocol,
Yeah.
Anthony?
Yeah.
Okay, then yeah, let's do that when we get to that because I want to go fully into that. That sounds great. That's a nice teaser for everybody. And you know, you just laid out how a lot of what you are trying to do is so much bigger than just the UAP conversation and disclosure and all these things. So I don't want to pigeonhole you into this topic too much. Although I rarely have the opportunity to talk to people who are so engaged with the conversation on the show. So I would be remiss to not really ask you a lot of questions about it, just because I think you're just more involved in that community. So I'd be curious what your takes are coming from actually being within it, you know, going to these conferences, being a part of this whole disclosure movement and all that kind of stuff.
Totally.
So feel free to branch out, but I have some
we
questions
know
about it.
it's an echo chamber, so we want to talk about this with other folks.
Cool.
So let's do it.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, just to kick it off then, I'm curious specifically talking about like UAP type stuff, the lens of that view of the phenomenon. How long have you been actively following it and looking at just 2026, let's say? How different is this moment from the past? You know, looking at the trajectory of the past, however long you've been following it, 10 years, 15 years, whatever. Is this really like, because from the outside, the news makes it seem like this is like a kind of crazy pivotal moment. Is that optics? Is that misinformation? Is that right on? That's a very broad question. So just kind of dive in wherever you want.
Great question. Great question. Very relevant. Anthony, go for it.
Oh man. Okay. Nicely done, Sinead.
Touch you out there.
Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, I only got into this topic like probably 2020 timeframe and in a very real way in terms of research and deep interest. Even though I just, I watched all the shows when I was a kid and the movies and I was into it from a sci-fi type perspective and fantasy. But it became much more real for me around 2020. So really looking back from that point and even earlier on, I guess, because I was aware of what was going on. I would say we actually are in a very pivotal moment right now. It's not just optics. Because there are so many, we always hear the word distractions in the socio-political arena, and commentators. There are, can I say shitload? There's a shitload of distractions out there that we have to deal with and have to think about. Doesn't mean you got to ignore them, but they're there, and we're exposed to them constantly, and increasingly more exposed to things as our digital age expands. And so the issue is that there's people out there who think that, just because the government is starting to talk about this, they're just using it as one of these other distractions so they can go do something else. Yeah, that can very much be the case. And there are a lot of there's a lot of groups, there's a lot of efforts, a lot of organizations, a lot of individuals who are actually doing the work on the ground and behind the scenes to move this topic forward. And a lot of whistleblowers coming forward, legitimate ones, and potentially illegitimate ones. There's both.
Mhm.
And there is a lot of disinformation and misinformation on the scene, targeting the people, targeting media, targeting Congress. It's all happening. There are different parties involved that are behind these things. There are private entities, government contractors. There's legacy programs that cross from there into the government world as well, potentially into the executive branch. There are likely international components to this with other governments and their, deep states that have been probably working on this stuff for a while. And there are it's all of it is happening is what I'm trying to say. And because of the networks that Sinead and I have developed, thankfully, over these last few years, which has been like a storm of synchronicities for me. I don't know about Sinead, but probably the same thing. Just insane synchronicities for how our networks have developed and the circles that we're in. But I think we both approach it from that understanding of the wider context and understanding that there is a lot of smoke and mirrors in this. And we're not out on our podcast talking about every little thing we hear in these circles because you never know. You never know where that information is coming from. You never know how the game of telephone worked for it to finally get to you, even if the person giving it to you is well intentioned. And with all that said, I will say, like, we talk when we talk about the issue of disclosure, like revealing all of this stuff to the public. There is So the idea is that, this information and the reality of UFOs and non-human intelligences or aliens have been known by a select group of people in these legacy programs for potentially for decades, and kept from the public for potentially various reasons. Um, what I've seen happening now in the last few years, and it's ramping up, is that core group of like these gatekeepers and secret holders has slowly started to expand as there have been more whistleblowers and more information coming out into the public domain. It's slowly expanding so that there is a wider group of secret keepers and gatekeepers. Meanwhile, most of the public is still thinking like, "Oh, this is disinformation. It's a hoax. It's a distraction," and they're allowing they're allowing the expansion of the gatekeeping and the secret keeping to expand into the same structures of our society and the same systems that have gotten us to where we are today in the world, which, in my opinion, is a pretty fucked up place. The
Mhm.
same capitalist, ultra capitalist structures, the same systems of power. Uh, they are kind of like on the outside periphery of this core group, and they're slowly like getting enough information to realize that this is real, and they need to figure out how to take advantage of it and how to use it to benefit themselves and to maintain their hold on power from their positions. That's what is happening right now. Like I can tell you because of the meetings and the dinners and the events that Sinead and I go to. Like these people know it's real. They have
Mhm.
had their disclosure already. It's a fact. It's the rest of us who are behind, and the more we kind of allow them to take the reins in that, the more likely it is that when there is a public disclosure, it will be controlled by those people. The messaging will be shaped by them, and we won't actually know what is happening and what the truth is. And right now is where people can step in, pass through that cognitive dissonance, do your research, look at what's out there, and figure out how to get involved because there are a lot of ways to get involved and to push this topic forward for the public. That's my take on it.
Just on that note, do you sense Since what we're talking about here, presumably, I guess it might be more complicated, is an intelligence that is being gatekept, like a non-human type intelligence, something agentic is being gatekept by this small group of people that you are describing as expanding out. Does that, whatever that is, that intelligence, that phenomenon, is it able to have like a populist agenda, or is it contained by these gatekeepers to the extent that it can't speak for itself? You know what I mean? Does that make sense?
Yeah. I'll give my take and then I'll let Sinead answer.
Yeah.
I obviously I don't know for a fact any of this.
Yeah.
I can tell you my analysis of the situation. I think that primarily what is being gatekept is the technology and information about this intelligence or from this intelligence, and it could be multiple intelligences. That's what we are hearing. It doesn't have to be one type of NHI or alien. It's possible there have been different agreements made with these groups between them and human groups. It's possible there are different agreements with different countries or groups in different countries because there appears to have been crash retrieval programs in different countries around the world for several decades that have been kept secret. So potentially we're looking at a scenario where there have been agreements made potentially to transfer certain technology or information to these groups, and they've been using that for who knows what, and keeping it secret. We've heard potentially that there are possibly bodies that are being held against their will, it seems, in addition to there being agreements made with some groups. So we don't know like what that entails. It's all on the table right now. And it does seem like, at least it seems like most of these intelligences are more advanced than us technologically. It seems like some, perhaps most, are more advanced than us consciously. Maybe not all of them. Maybe the ones who are more interested like self-interested rather than collectively interested are not as advanced as us. Who knows? Um, so the ones that are more advanced than us consciously, my take on it is that I don't think humans are in control of them. Even if human groups think they are, I don't think they are. So it's very possible like that there is a larger game at play where some of these groups, they may have certain protocols for how to interact with lower consciousness species or species who are not as evolved as them, to not make it as hierarchical, who have not reached the level they have. And maybe there's something like in Star Trek, where they can't directly intervene in certain ways, but maybe they can give certain technology here and there, and have certain agreements for how that technology is used. Maybe they have certain red lines that we cannot cross with weaponizing that technology. All of these things are on the table, and there are people who think that that is why we're seeing a ramp up in the disclosure process now, is that perhaps we have reached a point where some of these red lines are being approached. And because of the secrecy and the nature of the compartmentalization of it across all of these disparate groups, they don't talk to each other. The human groups who have this information, that perhaps some of them are not aware of some of these red lines that are in place, and are risking crossing them. So all of this is on the table. Is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
But in the end, I don't think humans have as much control as they think they do over some of this. The human groups who are the gatekeepers.
Well, I would like Sinead to jump in and comment on all of that before I ask more questions.
Sure. Oh my God. I think I'll just keep it simple. Really, I feel that the gatekeep, there's definitely is gatekeeping going on. I mean, that there's no doubt. Like it is for sure, and it's been going on for a very long time. And we're, somewhat aware of the reasons for that. And it certainly does seem like, although it's very easy to demonize the government as like a big blob that has one intelligence and operates as a big, like, you have to do what I tell you to do kind of force. The fact is that the government is made up of human beings, just like us, who are also doing the best that they can. And it's not like they're all in on some evil idea that they're trying to hold over on us, right? Like these are people who are also bewildered about what's going on and are also experiencing ontological shock because of the reality of this occurring, right? And they have access to information that we don't have that tells them that this is real, but also a surprising number. I'm still surprised by this. There is a surprising number of people who are quote unquote higher ups, right? Like in government, in military, who are experiencers, who are having direct, very profound experiences with the phenomenon in various ways, whether it's UAP or whether it's, orbs that could also be called UAP, whether it's beings. There seems to be an echo of or a reflection of what's happening on the ground for citizens, like just people all over the world, who are definitely having more and more contact with the phenomenon in various ways, in various forms. UFOs are showing up at an astronomical rate just all over the world, and they're being recorded. People have cameras now. Everybody has a camera. Everybody can record everything and put it on the internet and share it. The government cannot control that. Like even in China, right? Even in China, there's a huge underground movement of UAP activists, and they share openly videos with each other, information. People are very innovative and technology is malleable. We can use it for ourselves. There's a reason why hackers exist, right? Hackers exist outside of the confines of how we're supposed to, of the controlled internet structure, right? There's always doorways with how we can use it. So no matter what governments are like around the world, the fact is that citizens, people on the ground, are having contact experiences. So that cannot be gatekept. That cannot be controlled. And I think it's a bit of an illusion of humanity, of the state of being human, that the ego presents us with, right? Which is that we have control or that we have to have control. The ego is really, it serves a purpose, right? To keep us safe, keep us aware of what's going on, look out for our best interests, although it's not always in our best interest because it's often operating from a place of fear. But, collectively we seem to we think a lot of ourselves. We think that we're pretty all that, like humans, and that we're the smartest beings in the whole universe, and we have all the answers and we've got the best science and this kind of stuff. And if you are really paying attention to what people in the know are talking about with regard to contact, we do not have control. We do not. And there's evidence of that on video, such as UAP showing up and disabling nuclear sites or nuclear missiles, and what I find interesting about that is immediately the people that are directly affected by that, meaning people who are involved in the operations of nuclear stuff, missiles, sites, like nuclear, um, what's the word I'm looking for? Factories, not factories.
Bases.
Facilities or
Thanks.
bases.
Yeah. That they, they're controlling all of it. And so they're very, and of course it's a highly, highly sensitive topic and literally inflammatory, right? So of course they're unnerved when these things occur. But what's interesting to me is that the immediate automatic response is an ego response of fear, which is that they're disempowering us. Why are they disempowering us? Why are they taking away our defenses? Whereas my perspective is, they're obviously giving us the message that nuclear war, nuclear weapons are not okay, and that this is putting the world at risk, humanity at risk. Why are we going in that direction? Like, why is it all about, oh my God, they're doing something suspicious. They're taking away our power and our agency, right? And that's the message that's being sent out. But why isn't it also, hey, they're here to help us keep peace, keep us in check, prevent us from destroying ourselves, prevent us from destroying this amazing planet that we're so fortunate to live on. So it's interesting to me that, there's gatekeeping and there's control of the narrative, and there's also definitely a very deliberate display of optics, right, that is being presented. But there's so easily and right there in front of us other ways of approaching this topic that are just as available to us, and we're not able necessarily to see them, and to give ourselves a little bit more of an open, curious, perhaps balanced perspective, and be able to move away from the fear mongering and the, what are they and are they coming to get us kind of narrative that's also been rolled out very successfully in films and television for a very long time, right? So I think there's been a lot of messaging around be scared. It's the big unknown. We don't know what they are doing to us. But you can even expand on that and say, well, what's they? It's not, again, it's not like the government where it's just one big blob of aliens. There's tons of different kinds of beings out there. There's tons of different kinds of beings here on this planet. And we're not paying attention to them and their intelligence. Plants, animals, right? Unseen beings that live on our planet. We're not even paying attention to what's directly around us. And we're deciding that what's out there is bad and, is coming at us. But I think if we were able to be a little bit more flexible in our thinking, we would know that there are more options available for how to digest these experiences, how to digest this information, and how to move forward with it individually in our own lives. So I feel like that's a narrative that's missing, and I think that citizens on the ground in ufology and otherwise are trying to put that forward. But we're still also so conditioned to be fearful. And as Anthony was mentioning earlier, a lot of the people who are in this field are really just kind of parroting the fear narratives and it's an echo chamber because it sells. It sells, right? People like getting really worked up. That's the fact. They like getting really dramatic. That's why X is the way it is.
Oh,
Because
God.
people are,
Can't even look at that.
yeah, it's something else. X is a weird world. But, I just bring it back to myself, right? I just bring it back to, well, where's my responsibility in how I'm interacting with X, how I'm interacting with this information, right? Like making sure that I'm doing my own inner work. So I'm not just being pulled in various directions by emotions or by whatever fear narrative is out there. So, yeah.
And this is where, and I totally agree with Sinead on all that. And I think this is where we as like a UFO community can learn from the magic community and the witchcraft communities, is that a lot of what's done there is approached from a very relational approach and thinking with the entire cosmos around you. And there isn't necessarily always this hierarchical take on things. And there's this rebelliousness within it that's kind of inherent against some of these constructed human structures. And you don't have to live in a state of fear about what the government or your parents are going to do. You have it within you. And a lot of what we've seen in the experiencer literature, and in some cases our own experiences, Sinead and I, with these non-human intelligences, a lot of it calls for us to enter into a more relational way of being. And that is a narrative that often does not get discussed, as Sinead is saying, in the community. But it's there. It's all over the literature and the experiences. And it's not just about the nuclear weapons, although that is a big part of this. There have been experiences where people encounter a quote unquote alien and they tell them, if only you knew the powers that are within you, essentially. And I think we saw this in was it in the Virginia case, Sinead? I think that's what someone was in. Oh no, sorry. This was I'm gonna touch on this real fast because I think it's important. The Age of Disclosure documentary is one of these films that, like Sinead is saying, just focused on mostly the threat narrative approach. But there were a few things here and there that kind of touched on what we're talking about, but they weren't the main crux of the narrative in that film. But the filmmaker, Dan Farah, did like a 2.5 hour interview with Joe Rogan after the release of the film, which
Yeah,
did
they get
not get as much fanfare, but I definitely recommend everyone go and watch that, even if you don't watch the film, because he told a lot of the stories that did not get included in the movie. And in one of them, he talks about this supposed person who was on, I think they were on one of these legacy UFO crash retrieval programs, and they talk about having contact with one of these non-human beings, and there was this like telepathic connection that was initiated, and the being told him, I think as it was dying during one of the crashes, it told this person who was in the intelligence community, I think, if only you knew the powers that you humans have within yourselves, something to that effect. Um, so I feel like a lot of these phenomena are calling for us to reach within ourselves and around us in a more relational way. Yeah.
And I mean, honestly, that is my direct experience. Like, that's why I'm here in this community. I didn't start off, I didn't come into this community even on purpose. I didn't even intend to come into ufology. It was not a part of my life at all. And it was because NHI arrived in my life that I realized that something was happening. And then that's what, kickstarted my involvement in ufology. Um, but the direct experience of it, is so completely different than reading about it and maybe going along with the fear narratives. Like, there's so many hundreds and thousands of positive stories of healing, of, awakening, of expansion, of love, of empowerment, of connection, of, so many really powerful, profound experiences of expanding our humanity, who we are as people, that comes through the experience of contact with the phenomenon, with extraterrestrials, whatever they are. And I really wish that was more a part of the narrative. I really wish that that was also portrayed in films like Age of Disclosure, because it's documented. It's just as available as information as all the stuff that they did put into Age of Disclosure, which is a lot scarier, right? So it just, that lends towards me feeling even more like there is really a controlled narrative, and that there are people who are leaders in our field, like, for example, Lou Elizondo. I don't really know what to make of him. I hear from I've never met him. I hear from many people that he's a lovely person. Like, he's a very nice person. He's easy to talk to, seems to be genuine, coming from a genuine place.
I've met
Sure.
him, so I can confirm. Yeah, that's how he appears in person. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like, so many of our friends, know him, like him, support him. But then when I see Age of Disclosure, and I see how Lou really was the main voice of that film and the kind of narrative that's being presented, why is he, he knows that there's been tons and tons and tons of positive experiences around the world. Why isn't he including that? It just makes me wonder what's going on there, So I think we have to be careful about looking to people in the community who position themselves as leaders or in the position of being leaders. There's a reason why they're in that role, but it doesn't mean that they know everything that's going on or that we should follow their example. It's just information that we can take in and make use of it what we feel we need to. But it doesn't mean we have to just believe it and get caught up in it. And I'm including also people who say that it's all love and light, and, ETs are going to arrive in 2027. We're all going to shoot upwards to heaven in a beam of light. Everything's going to be great. I don't think that's accurate either, because it completely eliminates agency and self-work and, accountability and responsibility. It sort of lends to me to this, it's almost like a Christian or Catholic ideal of, as long as I go to confession every week, then I'm good. I'm fine. Right. And God loves me anyway. And I'm going to get to go to heaven and all my sins will be forgotten. So you can perform being, a person of faith without actually doing the hard work. You just go to confession every week and verbalize what you did wrong. And then that's it. Your soul is cleansed and you're all good for the next week. Right. And that doesn't really lend to doing deep hard work, like going into the shadow self, looking at fears, looking at the ego. And my own experience of contact has been that is incredibly important. That if I want more contact, if I want to evolve myself I have to engage in that kind of work. And my contact with the phenomenon is all about that.
Yeah. Yeah, I had some questions or some comments on everything you all just said. I will just quickly say that, yeah, my takeaway from at least my perspective on the phenomenon that I encounter is that evolution is the goal. Like that
Yes.
is the intention of the contact, the purpose. Maybe that's one faction of beings, and there's a whole other faction that disagrees with that, but that is definitely an element for me that I think is the key. But it's just funny to me hearing everything you just laid out. I think if somebody heard that who's not at all informed in this world, they might be like, well, hold on. Like, how does this work? How does the government have an agreement with an alien intelligence? How does this make sense? That there's love and light aspects that come to people, but then the government has all these like bad technologies. Like, how does this make sense? And then I just think about my own studies of magic from the early modern period in the British Isles. And I'm like, oh, this is exactly what we see there. If you actually give credence to spiritual model magic, you see peasants being accused of witchcraft who are trying to heal people and better their lives and having these like wild experiences. And then you see people in courts of empires being given military advice to spread empire further and colonize the world and making pacts with angelic beings to do this. And
Mhm.
you're like, oh, if you just
Are you referring
describe
to
that.
Rasputin?
Well, I was actually talking about John Dee in the
Oh yeah,
British
yeah,
Empire. But I mean, yeah, that's a whole other ball game right there. But so it's just like clearly this type of thing, if you, not to say that it is clearly one-to-one the same exact phenomenon we are talking about, but it's interesting how clearly it describes the same plot, you know what I mean, going on. So in that sense, it's like, if it's at all similar, then why couldn't a government pact with a intelligence that will give it the ability to have nuclear power or something like that? You know, like why not?
yeah,
Yeah, that's not really a question. It's just it's really interesting to see the similarities
yeah,
described between the commentary of this movement now and how it just connects so much to magical history.
yeah. I mean, I have a comment on that. I think like people can get kind of caught up cognitively and conceptually, I think, by thinking of this as some kind of anomalous phenomenon. But if you try to think of it as um, we have been extremely limited in our perception of true reality. We
Mhm.
have a very like we have blinders on in terms of how we perceive the cosmos around us. And sometimes, not sometimes, always throughout our history as a species, like generation after generation, we develop techniques and tools and things like that that expand our perception of reality. Um, whether it's like a telescope or a microscope or whatever, where they're looking up or looking in, we're expanding our access to perceive things. And it's not always visual either. Whether you're talking about different frequencies of sound or light or all of it, like we are constantly learning more about the world around us than previous generations knew. So I think these phenomena are part of a greater reality that is always around us. And some people have figured out ways to tap into that and to have access into a greater reality. And others, and they want to keep, some of them want to keep that control over others by not allowing the rest of us to realize that. And in some cases, there are structures that are baked in, I think, to our evolutionary process that need to come in time. But others have gotten ahead of us in that. So yeah, I think this is about catching up and evolving, as you're saying.
I feel like we're going backwards, like we're returning or remembering,
Hmm.
right? So it's almost like going backwards, but not in a regressive way rather than in a full circle way, right? Like thinking of time as a circle rather than a linear thing. So that we're coming back to meet ourselves again, like that's how it feels to me. I feel like we're being given because of whatever is happening on this planet right now. More and more and more opportunity to connect in various ways and therefore to remember who and what we really are and what we're capable of doing, just like those beings or that being who was dying in the UFO crash you mentioned earlier, Anthony, saying to the person that was there, if only you knew, if only you humans knew how powerful you really are. And we hear that over and over and over again from so many different kinds of beings and so many different kinds of experiencers. That is the message, right? And then you think even of why would these beings appear to children? There's so many stories of children, large groups of children at schools, the Westall School in Australia or the Ariel School in Rhodesia, right? Um, these large groups of children witnessing these beings from another world and a vehicle from another world landing in front of them and then communicating with them and saying, you have power, you are powerful, you can change the future of your planet, right? There's a reason why we're getting that message. And does that mean that there's no bad stuff out there coming from the extraterrestrials? Of course not. There's probably, look at humans, right? We could say we're one race of humans, but there's every single kind of possible expression of humanity exists on this planet, all mashed into, we're all mashed together. And even if we just look at ourselves, like, part of my own spiritual practice was doing shadow work and ego work and going into, like really, and this was not easy to do, but investigating the part of myself that could be, a Hitler or like a serial killer or whatever, because I think it's very important to be able to embrace if we think it's possible to evolve our consciousness and to become a better human being, we also have to hold equally the possibility and option of our ability to go the other way. And that we can go either way because all of those possibilities exist in us.
Yeah.
Right. So, of course, it makes sense that there are beings out there who are nefarious, who have nefarious intent, and there are beings out there who have our best interests at heart and are coming here for that reason also. So I just wish that the community was a bit more able to reflect all of that, like all the things and all the possibilities, rather than trying to put them into boxes and deliver a very, controlled narrative of their own, right? The podcasters in the community are doing it too. So the work, the self-work and the work of becoming more aware of how we speak, the words we're using, what kind of messages we're giving to each other, what kind of energy we're expelling into the world. Are we actually making contribution or not? Like, what is the benefit of what we're doing, right? I think it's really the time for us to start thinking about that and operating that way as much as possible for collective benefit, for our own benefit, and for the planet.
Yeah. And I totally agree with Sinead. I think the evolution of us is not linear, and it's not like you're going up or you're going forward. Um, I like to think of it as Ken Wilber had this thing called integral theory. Our mutual friend Darren, Sinead and I, this was one of his mentors. And in integral theory, they combine different disciplines and look at things from that perspective sociologically. And there's this model of essentially the evolution of consciousness called spiral dynamics. And it is a spiral of evolution. It's not up and down. So it's interesting. And I would recommend people check that out.
Not to derail us into like gossip, because that's so meaningful, all the things you just said. But on this topic, what are your thoughts on Obama and Trump's separate, strange comments about UAPs? What's your honest take about both of them? Is this as meaningful as it sometimes appears? Or, Obama quickly pivoted away from what he said? Yeah, I don't know. I'm just curious what your take is on that as people who are aware of all the nuance going on with this.
I'll jump in. So I think it's very funny, like what Obama did, I think is actually quite amusing. He's a character, he likes to kind of be mischievous and he likes doing things like that. However, I also feel that this was not off the cuff. It was not a casual thing, right? Like he was doing this very deliberately with awareness of what he was doing. And also the reporter did not ask any follow-up questions, which is not journalistic practice. Like if someone says something intriguing, you dig deeper. You don't go, oh yeah, okay, so now on to the next thing. So that was interesting. And then also the way he said it was interesting. I mean, he was basically saying, yes, I know they're real. Like he pretty much was saying that, right? And then going deeper into it. So what purpose does that serve of just dropping the mic and walking away like that? And there's a meme I just love. Like to me, this encapsulates the whole thing in a humorous but also quite clever way. I talked about this on some other interview Anthony and I did recently. I think it was Somewhere in Disguise. But anyway, it's a meme and has 4 panels, kind of like a comic strip. the first panel is Obama saying, what he said. The second panel is Trump going, "Oh, he's in trouble now." Like that statement he made on, that was confidential, that was classified. He shouldn't have said that. And then the third panel is Trump saying, "I'm going to release the files, and it's time to do this." And then the fourth panel is Obama wears glasses, going, "Oh, right, yeah, you're the disclosure president. You're the disclosure." Right. So it seems as if it kind of made me wonder if, even though the optics are very convincingly that they can't stand each other and would never work together, I still kind of wonder if maybe that was an orchestrated bipartisan agreement, because it was
That's
almost like
interesting.
Obama teed up the ball for Trump, knowing that Trump would want to jump on it, because that he's always got to get the last word in. He's always got to be, the one who's doing the most important thing. So I kind of wonder if that was deliberate on Obama's part. I don't know if it would have been deliberate on Trump's part, but it makes sense, that his people would have had awareness of the fact that he was going to say that, meaning I'm going to release files. And it's also interesting because of what Trump is experiencing in his presidency, right? The Epstein files, it's a huge, huge deal. And it seems like UAP and the war in Iran are very successful distractions from that whole situation. So I think there's different things going on. I think it's for real. I think that they're definitely moving disclosure forward with awareness by saying those things. But there's also a game being played.
Yeah, I would agree with basically everything Sinead just said. I also want to add today, like a few hours before we recorded, the Office of the Executive, through the I forgot the acronym. It's CISA. It's basically a cyber and information security agency within the Department of Homeland Security. Just registered a domain called aliens.gov. Like this just happened a few hours ago.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So
That's
I don't know,
crazy.
like, and who knows? Like, it's possible it could mean aliens, like immigrants with this administration. You never know. But
That's true.
and again, so I think, yeah, I think there is a game being played, as Sinead said. I also think there is a lot of what's the word I'm looking for? Not optics, but they're signaling. There's signaling being done. And it's not always to us, the regular people. I think there could be signaling done to certain select groups, to certain sectors of society, that it's okay to move forward on this topic and start treating it like you do anything else, because it destigmatizes it in a way. And there's also this maybe unintentional destigmatization, as Sinead was getting at, that happens with the general public as they're hearing this more and more, they're seeing it get picked up in media outlets that those made headlines across the country and in some cases across the world. Even though Obama did walk it back, like the next day on a long Instagram post, he was like, "Oh, basically Fermi paradox. Of course, there are aliens out there in the universe. I'm not saying they're here." Yeah, and then he takes a sip of his coffee. Yeah, so I think there's a lot of signaling happening. There's a lot of smoke and mirrors and games, and whether or not this is kind of what I was trying to get at earlier in our conversation. Regardless of what the intention is and who it's targeting, I think there is a wider game at play that even these humans are not aware of.
Yes.
That is impacting the collective consciousness or unconscious, the zeitgeist around this topic, that is expanding our willingness to, our capacity to treat this as real ontologically. It's something that will help us, many of us, overcome the cognitive dissonance that gets triggered constantly when this topic gets brought up. That just causes people to shut down and or smirk or chuckle, whatever it is, and then move on with the rest of their lives. I think the more that things like this happen on a larger scale and from high level officials, even if someone is not, cracked open ontologically as it happens, I think it can act as like a reference point psychologically in our psyche for the future whenever something does happen to you individually, or if something happens collectively, like in a big event, your mind will go back and maybe your heart will go back to something like that as a reference point. And from there is how we can shape reality and build reality. Because without those reference points, I think that's where that complete ontological shock can happen, or just complete cognitive dissonance happens and you just shut it all out. So these are reference points, I think, that are being created sometimes unintentionally by people. But I think there's a wider game at play.
I have more questions for you that I want to ask you in a little Patreon segment. But before that, can you just plug away all the stuff you're doing and where people can check you out? And yeah, all the things.
Sure. We are we're at Fire in the Cosmos, at Fire in the Cosmos on X, on Instagram, on Facebook, on YouTube, and on Patreon. We have a few special offers that we're starting to increase, as you are, Chad, on our Patreon. So we encourage people to sign up there and support us. We are independent, where we fund ourselves. So the more support, the better. We appreciate that. We do have our format is video format, so YouTube is the preferred place to view our podcasts. But we also have audio podcasts on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your audio podcasts. And we are also, I think we can say this now, we're creating a retreat this fall in towards the end of October. We'll make an official announcement on that on our Patreon and our socials coming up shortly. And yeah, it's a 2-night retreat. It's going to be in Central Virginia, in rural Central Virginia. And we're really looking forward to that. And we're doing it with our friend Natalie, who has her own podcast called Tales from the Truth Seekers. So keep an eye out for that. Sinead, I don't know if you want to talk about Contact in the Desert or anything like that.
Sure. Yeah. So my life has become entirely about all this stuff. I'm just headfirst, both feet in. So I'm doing this podcast with Anthony, and my job is director of communications for the physicist Tom Campbell's nonprofit called the Center for the Unification of Science and Consciousness. And I'm very lucky to have that position. I didn't go looking for it. I did not apply for it. It literally landed in my lap. This is one example of the universe just repeatedly helping me out in this field. It's kind of amazing. I am doing that, director of communications now since the end of May last year. And we're moving really fast. We're incredibly dynamic as an organization. It's actually incredibly exciting. We're researching human consciousness, and because consciousness is really taking off as a topic in the field right now and in various forms of industry, we're just flourishing. Like, I think I was the first hire. Now we're a team of 9 people, and we're doing all kinds of amazing projects that all have to do with investigating what consciousness is, how it could be fundamental to our reality, and how it can help us with our human evolution. It can help us with so many different aspects of human life here. And then also I helped to organize Contact in the Desert. So this year I helped to create the lineup. I'm very excited about that. Tom Campbell is going to be presenting as well as many other amazing people like our friend Joshua Cutchin, who is really incredible. Absolutely love him. His work is amazing.
He's the best.
So he is going to be a speaker. Very much looking forward to that. And a number of other people. I'm so sorry. My landlord is here changing the locks on my door. It's going to be.
Don't worry about it.
It's happening.
Don't worry about it.
I'm so proud. I just want to say I'm so proud Sinead was able to make that happen with Joshua, because
That's awesome.
We need more people in the UFO community exposed to his approach and his research, for sure.
100%.
Thank you for that. Yeah, it's really, really important to me to bring in new voices. I feel like we're seeing a shift of the tide in terms of the community and leaders in the community. Chad, you're going to be in contact. I definitely have you on my list. Yes, I want you to be there speaking. It's very
I'll have to
important.
think of what I'd present on, but sure.
Because you have such a unique voice. You're a witch and you're a man. That's a very uncommon thing. You bring a wonderful amount of feminine wisdom as well as masculine wisdom, just like Anthony does too. And also just your incredible vocabulary and your breadth of knowledge and, your outstanding Substack. You have so much to contribute. So it's
Thank
very
you.
important to me to bring up new leaders in the field and also to show people that um, we need to not go to the same people all the time for advice, perspective, takes on what's going on. They have a very valuable role in our community, and we stand on their shoulders 100%. All respect to them. But the fact is that the community has changed enormously in terms of its approach to the phenomenon, and it really is time for that level of conversation, of thinking, of integration of this information to be better reflected in public spaces. So that's a big priority to me. I also help to organize the science of oh my God, the Scientific Coalition for UAP Studies. That's a mouthful too. So their conference is happening in Toronto this year, which is a huge deal because nothing happens in Canada. It's the weirdest thing. Just nothing happens over here. Everything is in the
Weird.
US or Europe. There's small things happening in Canada, but there's no like big fancy UFO events that get everyone's attention and bring everyone here. So I'm really happy that's happening. That's in July. And I'm also helping to organize Julia Mossbridge's event, which is going to be a conference that is women centered, divine feminine centered, sort of female wisdom centered, but also involving consciousness, UAP, human evolution, science research, and
AI.
in October. And then I'm doing the podcast with Anthony and just trying to make a contribution anywhere I can, mostly by helping people connect with each other, introducing people to each other, especially when I hear about interesting things that people are doing. If it makes me think about someone else, I go, ooh, you've got to beat this person, because I think it's really important for us to share all the time with each other our wisdom, our experience, our connections, and really build a very strong, collaborative, mutually supportive and beneficial community rather than having these separate subsets where the Bigfoot people have their Bigfoot and the UFO people have their UFOs, and, everyone's separate and they think that that's what's going on and it couldn't possibly be also Bigfoot, right? But the fact is that all this stuff is very intersectional and it's all interrelated. And if consciousness is fundamental, which I personally think it is, then these are all just expressions of consciousness, and the root is still our existence and what we're doing with it. So yeah, I will not blather on further, but that's pretty much it. I'm also trying to get our Substack going because I'm a writer and I really want to
Nice.
do that. So maybe I can ask for some of your advice on that, Chad. But Anthony is also an excellent writer, and we have thoughts and perspectives and experiences around the podcast, not directly related to it, but in relation to it, that we just don't have the time to share. So having a Substack, I think, is a great idea to be able to communicate with the community and let them communicate more with us as well. Yeah.
Amen. I
Yeah.
love it. Well, I'm very excited to see what comes of that. That's great.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, let's transition now to the after show, Radical LFAM After Dark. Yeah,
After
yeah,
Sinéad blocks were changed.
yeah. What you said there about the Substack and wanting to express ideas you can't put in a show. Yeah, to me, it's so part and parcel with why to have a podcast, because you're clearly inviting people on to learn and to kind of build your own vision of these topics. And so it makes perfect sense that would then need to be communicated through your own ideas too, like as a valuable conversation between the show and then how you're processing what you're learning and growing from that process.
Yeah.
Because
We're really
that
inspired. Yes.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So that's been fun for me, is going like, oh, I can write like a little essay, and instead of just quoting from books, I can quote all these people I've talked to that are informing these ideas.
Yeah.
And so suddenly it becomes almost like a different thing than what we normally think of as like writing about these subjects. It becomes this very like experienced type endeavor. So yeah, I would love to see what you guys do in that regard. That'd be super cool.
Thanks. Yeah, and there's also a ton of people we talk to, like, who don't make it on our show, like, all the
Oh,
time,
yeah, yeah,
that,
yeah.
that have amazing, valuable information that we wanna get out there,
Hmm.
so for sure.
Dude, that's great. Well, I'm stoked. That's awesome. So yeah, for the after show, I kind of wanted to focus on your like extracurricular stuff, which it's very cool that you just mentioned that you're doing the retreat because you had mentioned that to me, but I wasn't aware it was going to be like a public thing. So that's really cool to hear about. So maybe just to kick things off, yeah, like hearing people that have a podcast that has a large UAP emphasis are having a retreat to me is really exciting because it just sounds like, oh, so clearly this field is going in the direction of what magical communities are doing. Because that's the type of thing I think of when I think of like, oh, a group of people involved in the phenomenon are at a retreat. You know, I guess it could be a Bigfoot hunt, you know, or something like that. But so to hear about UAP, I find that really exciting. So I guess what would a retreat entail within the Fire in the Cosmos vision of this topic? Like, what would the activities be like? What are the goals? Yeah.
Nature intelligence, for sure.
Okay. I love that.
Only nature intelligence, communicating with nature, being part of nature. And that also involves getting into the body and out of the head, right? Getting into the
Hmm.
senses, getting into the intuition. So we're going to offer that. We're also going to one of Anthony's favorite words is enchantment. So
Hmm.
that lends to magic. It lends to, the magic that exists in nature, the magic that exists all around us in energetic form, with or without beings present. And so I think that's a very important aspect as well. And then Anthony, well, we haven't planned the whole thing yet. We're still forming it, but we have different ideas of what we want to do.
Yeah, we have a few different, workshops in mind and people that we have in mind who can offer those. Just different, like, energetic modalities that we're interested in, whether it's through sound or somatics through the body. Um, some things that we have dabbled in ourselves, and our friends have. We also wanna do, like, we wanna have a fun time. We understand the importance of cultivating a different way of being that we have forgotten, it seems like, in the Western world, that seems to only be found among children and kids, maybe less so these days with the rise of technology. Um, but I grew up, like, playing outside, and that is where I found my enchantment, and that's where the imaginal kind of, came into shape for me when I was a kid. And we're not the only ones who think this. Like, this has come up in official scientific and governmental circles who study consciousness and psychic phenomena. There is an understanding that there is a connection with the way your mind is working, or not working potentially when you're in that state of being. So we're going to try to cultivate that in different ways. I used to DJ on the side, so I'm going to bring my DJ decks and maybe we'll have a little dance party too. So
That's great. Hell
yeah.
yeah. Oh my God, that's awesome. Yeah. Well, that's super exciting. I'm very excited to see where that goes too. It's a great idea. And on that topic, not exactly related, but I wanted to bring up something you've talked a fair amount about, Anthony, which is your contact protocol. And I want to bring it up mainly because I tried it out, which is kind of fun. So I think it'd be interesting to have a conversation where I know we've both done it. Sinead, have you tried Anthony's contact protocol?
I'm
Okay.
familiar with that type of protocol, but I have not done
Hmm.
specifically Anthony's protocol.
Okay. So I don't want to shut you out of the conversation. So please be as involved as possible. But maybe just for the listeners, if you could describe, Anthony, what your contact protocol is and maybe how you landed on what it is. You know, how much was it a trial and error? How much was it kind of like a thing you tried once and you're like, great, it's perfect. I don't need to, no notes, like some, that kind of thing.
Mm, sure. Yeah, I also want to add Sinead has her own, energetic and if you want to call it
Let,
contact
let's
work.
hear both then.
Yeah.
So let's see like what your version is. And then Sinead, I'd like to hear yours and maybe we could see, yeah, how they might be useful for different types of people.
Sure.
Or could even be
Um,
combined or something, yeah.